And welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Bubba and the BatFlip, episode 45. We have like 3 or 4 days worth of baseball in the books now. The Dodgers-Giants are wrapping up the weekend, their 4th game on this wonderful slate of action. We got a bunch of injuries to talk about, some fab, and much, much more. You can find me on Twitter at BDintric, and my co-host, as always, on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. Toby, how we doing, man?
I'm doing great, Bubba. We've got 4 days of baseball in the bag, pretty much. Like you mentioned, there's still a game going on. Not gonna lie, though, I'm exhausted. I feel like fab is kind of like, I don't know if exercising is the right thing, but like playing actual sports, where it's like you don't do it for 9 months and then you try to do it and you're just like what's happening? Like I can't. Like mentally challenging, like physically, I'm absolutely exhausted. I was up till like 2 o'clock in the morning last night, like trying to do it. And of course, I already noticed one mistake I made, but oh well, it happens. Right?
I can only imagine doing fab for like you doing fab because you have so many teams you have to do fabs for. I could just I think I have like 7 or 8. That takes me a good hour and a half or so if I'm really diligent on it. A couple of rosters, I was like, I really don't have a lot I want to churn and spend on, so it wasn't as bad this week. But I can only imagine what you're going through right now. So that's we'll get to the fab. We will get to the fab here.
We will get to the fab. It will be a part of the program, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, weekly on this edition. Before we get into the recent news, the injuries, all the craziness that's taken place this past weekend, let's talk some positivity here. And
positivity, Bubba?
Yes, concept.
What is this positivity you speak of?
Light at the other side of the rainbow. It's a good times here. Good stuff.
I thought it was gold.
There, light at the end of the tunnel. There we go.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some gold.
There we go. Well, the way you're starting out in the main event, you're looking at some gold, but we'll get to that also here. There's a listener question on that, so we'll get to that there in a little bit. But
proof that over the course of 4 days, anybody can win. Like the lottery, dude. Just.
Oh, that's great. No, you got your boys, Real Muto. I love every time Real Muto goes yard, Yancey tweets out, BatFlip crazy must be. Because we pretty much know you have like 90% of the shares of JT Real Muto out there.
Not going to lie, like he was up today with the bases loaded. And I was watching it, and he got 2 pitches that he just missed from Yimi Garcia on the Marlins. And then he popped out, of course. So we didn't get anything out of it. I was ready. There was a couple times today where I was just ready to explode like that. And then Will Myers getting up with a runner on second, down 1 against Archie Bradley, like my arch nemesis. So it's just like, I thought it was coming together. I thought the world was like, there was going to be some portal that opened or something like that.
Yeah, this is how, like, just the start of this conversation, I was going to say, let's just talk about what we enjoyed this week, and we already are. So it just shows you how much we love baseball because everyone knows you're the JT guy. I'm getting text. I wake up from a nap yesterday to Mike Curlin DMing or tweeting at me about Didi Gregorius going deep for the 2nd straight day because I was the guy that was high on Didi. Like, we all have these fun things, but like, what stood out to you? Because there's a ton of awesomeness. We're going to have to go to some of the negatives with the injury replacement stuff. But what were some of the positives? Because there was a lot of good baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so many things to draw away from. I mean, I think that obviously we talk about positivity. But there's some really good hitting teams, I think, right? And there's going to be some ball games that are like really high scoring games here, especially we're not even in the number 4 and 5 starters for most teams, right? And I think we're seeing some really high scoring games. And so I think that's one thing that kind of stood out to me is, and I definitely think the ball is the same. Like, there's been some home runs that have been hit. There's been a lot of oppos. I remember the White Sox, I think, hit like 3 or 4 opposite field home runs, like in one game against the Twins. So I think there's that. I think there's, and the injuries is obviously something that is important, right? And then the COVID stuff, and we want to keep it positive, but it's important to recognize that because, there's certain teams that's going to impact. And so hopefully they can sort out a way to make sure that doesn't happen, whether that's all of the players wearing their masks. You have like Frankie Lindor playing the whole game with his mask on, if Francisco Lindor can do that, like other players can. I think, obviously, like I'm a fan of the Aces, and for the ones that didn't get injured, they really, I think, you saw that on Wednesday. There was just some incredible performances already where it felt like the pitchers were ahead of the hitters. And then now we're seeing where it's like, well, maybe it's just there's some good pitchers that went, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday a little bit too. So the next couple of days is going to be really interesting because we're getting into some real tough stuff going. Yeah. How about you? Is there anything that stood out for you?
After about the first like 3 pitchers in a rotation, it's going to get real ugly. We saw some of that on Sunday. And like you said, Monday is going to be an interesting set of pitching matchups out there overall. But it was fun. Like watching Cookie Carrasco absolutely deal today with everything he's gone through. We love Cookie on this show. A lot of people do. That was awesome to see. He was just locked in. That was good. There was, like you said, tons of great pitching over the weekend. Seeing Nelly Cruz, just 40 years old but doesn't care. Like, that's a beautiful thing. Your Bomba squad just teeing off like crazy again.
Bomba squad. The Twins. Twins and White Sox, man. Those games are legit. Awesome. Yeah. Like, both of those lineups are just so deep.
Young and awesome.
And yeah, they're young. They're awesome. They have fun. The Padres, dude. Like, the Padres look like they were having a party on the field yesterday. It was amazing. Like, that is something that I think we're seeing more of that. I don't know. I feel like we're seeing more of players kind of taking the lead, in setting the tone or the, and I don't know whether it's as a result of COVID and just like, like there's so much at stake for them, but just like really owning their own, like the game. And I think that's really good news for baseball because MLB is so backward. Like, I think the players are really starting to really, really push that, which has been exciting. Like, just, it's game 3, like it was game 2 and the Padres were like, just having a blast,
like how awesome,
having a blast, I bet.
How awesome would like a White Sox Padres World Series be? Just those two the youth there, 7-game series. Like, pitching can kind of be hit and miss at times, but it'd be just amazing stuff.
Oh man, it's and I think that's it's really wonderful. And I know we always have to contextualize it within what's going on because not everything is wonderful. But just being able, like, I check box scores religiously. I check live scoring religiously, and it's a god awful habit. And I hope nobody else develops it. But like, there is this strange sixth sense of satisfaction that I get out of just doing, like, just like checking it out. Your guy's up and you see the score change. You're just like, oh, damn.
If it's a big moment, you take it off like the Yahoo feed to like the live MLB feed so you can see where the balls and strikes are because you're sitting there waiting. Oh, yeah.
I just skip around game to game watching the guys that I have in. My favorite thing is when your guy's leading off and then you check the score and they've scored one more run and there's no outs and you're like, guess what? I know what the only possible outcome there is, right?
In play runs, home run.
Boom.
Yep.
JT Realmuto.
There you go. So yeah, I'm with you. It's been great watching lineups come out and dissect those before locks, and then watching the box scores is always a good time. But let's get into some of the news and notes from the week. We'll kick it off with the big one. Justin Verlander. He pitched pretty well in his first start. Didn't seem to be too crazy. No reports coming out of that. He had the hip and the groin issue in the offseason. Nothing crazy, but he's down and out for the rest of the season with a shoulder injury, or an elbow injury, which seems pretty crazy. Kind of came out of nowhere for this one for me. Obviously, you can't just replace Justin Verlander, but how would you, with the Stros, you got Framber Valdez or Keedy, maybe Whitley, and other options. What do you think the plan of attack is?
Yeah, shout out to Samada who just put a sad face in the comments over there.
And we'll get to those other questions towards later in the show.
For sure. Yeah, with Verlander, I mean, obviously he had the 2 issues earlier this year. I own him in places though because Verlander he's the best, right? He's been the best starting pitcher the last 2 years in a row. He's been utterly dominant, right? And so it's a risk that a lot of us were willing to take, and I took in some of my one of my bigger leagues, which is unfortunately because I also have Strasburg in that league. But with Verlander, you can't necessarily replace him. But I think like the more and more of the sense that I get is it is a shortened season, and so we need to move quickly. But what strikes me as like a decent strategy, especially if you're really scrambling for pitching, and people have mentioned this before, and I was a little down on it to begin with, but I think right now kind of middle relievers or those guys who are kind of high skilled with the higher Ks are a nice little bridge, because I think the hardest thing about the shorter season is we don't know who guys are yet, right? Is like we have such a small sample and we only see them against certain teams, right? So it might be like, and this was actually the first thing that concerned me a little bit about Verlander is he had a great start outcomes wise, but when you looked under the hood, his CSW was like around 27%, and he was going against the Mariners. And I thought that was a little tricky, because I think that's what you got to contextualize a lot of the stats you're seeing with is like, who are they facing? That's what makes something like Spencer Turnbull so impressive today, is because he was going against maybe a little bit of a softer side of the Reds lineup than usual, but like he was going up against a good team. There are some bad teams there. Well, I said there were some good teams. There's some really bad teams, I think, too, that you're going to need to take advantage of. And so I think what you got to do is you got to play matchups. You got to take some risks. Maybe middle relievers for like this week, next week, and maybe the next week, just so we get a sense of like who may be good or not. But what you got to do is you got to jump in front of the line to the guys who could potentially be good, right? And so if you're in a shallower league, you're going to have a few more options. In a deeper league, like maybe, you're not going to have that many options. But I think those are some of them. And what I might recommend, especially if you're chasing saves, is like I targeted a guy like Jonathan Hernandez of the Rangers a lot this week in Fab, where it's like the cost isn't prohibitive, right? I think it was like $24, $18, something like that with the bids that I got him. Leclerc already looks a little shaky. They've already mentioned that they maybe want to move him around a little bit. So just kind of maybe taking some of those risks where there could be high upside and you believe that a guy is actually pretty good. So that's what I would kind of do, because I don't think there is a replacement. So you can't replace the volume necessarily, but you can at least try to get at some of those skills and give yourself a little bit of time to better understand which pitchers are kind of with it a little bit and which ones are maybe a little behind in their preparation.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that. And that kind of brings me to a question I wanted to ask you, because I know you pay attention to the CSWs, the velocities, all that kind of stuff. And Jeff Zimmerman does his usual like spring training notes. He was tweeting stuff out. A lot of guys are tweeting stuff out. But Jeff tweeted out a list from opening night alone, and I know there's been more since opening night, especially when it comes to like closers. A lot of closers with some down velocity, like Bumgarner's down, Morton's down, Anderson was down, Aaron Nola, Duffy, Heaney, Stripling, Musgrove, Frankie Montas. A lot of guys are down, and we've talked about it, and it's kind of a listener question that we can kind of hit now, or we can bring it up later as well. In a shortened season, we got to pull the pin quicker. Like, how do you want 2 starts of bad velocity and you get concerned, or what are you going to do there? Because like with Verlander, yes, the CSW is down, but the results fantasy-wise were still good. So you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to roll with him. But what are you doing with this? Because I know you focus on stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's helpful to realize is that the vast majority of people are in the same boat. Like everybody is looking at pitchers and just being like, good God. Next week, like at least in 15-teamers, like next week I'm starting like Alec Mills on like all of my teams. I'm starting Merrill Kelly on some of my teams, even though he's got like a start against the Dodgers. Like we're all in the same boat where we're struggling with volume. We're struggling with the lack of really decent pitchers. And I think you need to analyze and figure out who you think might be able to outperform, what those expectations are. And I do think the velocity readings are helpful. So like, and I think Saris has talked about this before, but, I think over the course of a season, generally velocity increases like about a mile per hour, I think. And I'm not sure how much of that is just guys getting,
getting loose, stretched out,
warmed up, and also the weather maybe a little bit too, like getting hotter weather. But whatever it is, like they're if a guy's like within 1 mile per hour or not, like I think that's fine. And I think that's what Jeff's tweet said, generally speaking, or maybe it was 0.5 miles per hour. But like, look at those types of factors, because it's like Charlie Morton for me. That's look at what Charlie Morton did, and I'm like, because his velo was down about like 2 miles per hour, I think.
2.6.
Like 2.6 miles per hour. He got his CSW was like 22%. And once the Blue Jays realized that, I think, once they caught on to it that second time around, he couldn't get any swings and misses. He couldn't get any called strikes because that's a massive difference. So I'm like looking at him and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start him at Atlanta because he's like, he's Charlie Morton. But I'm like, that I'm struggling with that, right? Like I have about as much confidence in Charlie Morton this week as I do with Alec Mills and his 2 starts, and hopefully he figures it out. But I think these are the data points. And I think like Jeff is great. I mean, Jeff puts out so much good content over and over and over again. And I'm in like a 12-team high stakes league with him, the one that I've already lost Verlander and Strasburg in. But that's the stuff I think you need to pay attention to. Like, pay attention to the skills, don't pay attention to outcomes. So like, if a guy gets rocked, take a look. What was he doing? Like, not like your Tommy Malone who had like an outrageous CSW of like 37% in his start, because like he's always actually been pretty good CSW wise, but he just gets rocked. But like, take a look at those guys who are interesting, like your Spencer Turnbulls. You're like, he had a good outing, but even if let's say Castellanos gets a base hit off of him there with the bases loaded, and he gives up 3 runs instead of 1, so he goes 5 and gives up 3 earned runs. You look under the hood and you're like, you want to know something? That was a pretty good team. The skills were there to support the strikeouts and to support the good performance. That's okay. I'd be flipping out if I was a Joe Jimenez owner right now, because Joe Jimenez is down like 2 miles per hour right now, and his max velo is lower than his average velo. He's got those 2 saves in the bag, but my
saves,
God,
baby. 2 saves.
It wasn't pretty.
No,
and that's what you're hoping, right? Is that the velo comes once he gets a little bit more time. But you got to be cognizant of those types of things. Like Wade Davis, I had him in this week because he was on the road, got those 2 saves. But man, the velo's down. He does not look good. So any games in Coors, I'm not putting him in there. So just try to understand like where they are from a skill perspective. Ignore the outcomes as much as possible right now, and try to let that be a guide to who's playing and who isn't, as opposed to being reactive. And also on Fab, wait for guys to get impatient and to put those guys on the wire who are playing well but not getting the outcomes. Happens every year in May, where you start to get those fines as people lose interest. That's going to be starting next week, the week after that. And you're still going to have 7 weeks, 8 weeks of the season to take advantage. So don't try as much as possible not to chase outcomes right now. Look at those skills. Let that be kind of the guide that's helping lead you hopefully to the promised land.
You mentioned Steven Strasburg. I'm going to jump to him right now just because we're on topic with that. He was scratched from his start with nerve issues in his hand, took a shot for it. They said he started feeling it last Monday after his exhibition start with the Orioles. Good reporting. Glad we found that out till the day of. Good stuff there.
That was brutal.
They feel like he's going to be fine. He's day-to-day, but I don't know. How you are a Strasburg owner. I don't have him anywhere. I wanted him. I had nothing against him. I just never got him. He's day-to-day with this issue. Like, how comfortable are you with him? Like, even this week, are you going to put him in assuming he's going to start, or what are you doing?
Right now, he's not in my lineup because I think there's the question of whether he's going to play, number one. Like, I read the article. I think it was either The Athletic or Washington Post. It was not good. He was like, I felt this earlier on in the season. Obviously, he pitched okay during spring, so it didn't bother him that much. But he was like, bothered me more and more. And he said, like, this was the last shot, I think is what he said. He was quoted as saying.
Like he's had more than one, which is scary.
Yeah. And so I don't have him in my lineups right now. I'm waiting. If there's no news, I'm just going to roll without him in there and put in another reliever. I'm fortunate in some of the leagues where I have him, where I have like Nick Birdie, or I have like, 3 closers and maybe a 4th that's kind of a speculative closer type thing. So that's where I'd roll with them, because what you don't want to do is get the total 0, and also with Strasburg, this is the first time he's going to be pitching. You don't know if he's going to get the Baltimore start, or is it No, it's who do they have? Who do they have to start off with? Miami. No.
Yes. No, Miami's going south. They have Washington. Don't they have Baltimore?
Toronto.
Okay.
So they have Toronto, and then they have Miami. So they have Toronto for 4. So if he pitches against Toronto, they're not that great of a team. They look pretty good this weekend, actually. Against a really tough Rays team. But, they're not somebody who scares me necessarily, and neither is Miami. So if he pitches, I think you're feeling pretty good. But you also don't know with the nerve issue, is he going to go 5?
Yep.
Probably not.
It could pop up at any moment.
Yeah.
It's scary.
I just, and so unless I hear he's starting X date, if that happens before lock tomorrow, then I'll have him in there. If not, I'm just going to keep him out. And then if I miss a start, it sucks. But, I'm trying to miss out on as few zeros as possible.
All right. We talked about some COVID things. We have to talk about the Reds had a catcher go down with it, and then there's two players got scratched today due to not feeling well. They have not come out and said it's COVID. Maybe it's not. Maybe they're just not feeling well. But it's kind of weird because Mike Moustakas went on the 10-day IL for not feeling well. Nick Senzel has not gone on the IL yet. Makes you kind of think maybe one has it, one's waiting for a test. I don't know. Like they don't have to say anything, obviously, but it'd be kind of strange to put Moose on the IL not feeling well in the morning. So there's a good – well, obviously, he's out for this week. What are you doing with Moose? Because I'm not dropping him, obviously, but it's one of those if we start hearing he's got symptoms or he's dealing with some issues, this could be like a 3 to 4 week thing. And now we're in a different situation.
Yeah, I think you just have to monitor it. I mean, I think we've seen so far, relatively speaking, that each case is different, but guys can succeed afterwards. Like we look at Yohan Moncada.
Look at Tommy Pham, Steele's machine.
Tommy Pham, DJ LeMahieu. So again, not to underestimate the virus but each person is reacting differently to it. So it's possible. So what I would do with Moustakas, monitor the news closely this week, see what happens, see what you're hearing. I think if he's symptomatic, I think you might have to move on just because I think the challenge and the thing I always ask myself with the injury questions, and I did this with Verlander, right? Because I think you mentioned he's out for the season. It's come out that it was like it's a forearm strain, I think, which is always the worst possible news ever.
Tommy John indicator.
So he's out 3 to 4 weeks, I think, or like a few weeks. But I've dropped him in my 12-teamer. And it's just like what I ask myself is, okay, if you're in a league that doesn't have an IL and you have a short bench, you're looking at those 3 weeks. And then that's just until he's able to pitch, right? Mm-hmm. And then you add on how long does it take to get him game ready? Then when he's game ready, is he pitching enough innings to be good? And is he pitching well enough to help you out, right? And I think that's the key. And when you look at it, you're like, okay, let's say the chance of it being 3 weeks is 50%. And then the chance that it takes another week or two for him to ramp up is 50%. Yep. And then the chance that he pitches 5 innings in those first couple starts is 50%. All of a sudden, you're down at 12.5% chance. And then the chance that he pitches good is even smaller than that. So that's just like a basic way that I like to think about these injuries. And more often than not, I did it with Snell last year when he got injured. And it was like he might come back towards the end of the season. Is like, you just got to move on because that roster spot is very valuable if you have a short bench and you don't have IL slots. So I would say just move forward, just move on, just do it.
That's with Verlander. Moustakas, wait and see.
Moustakas, wait and see. Yeah.
Sure. Real quickly, Josh Van Meter looks to get the most playing time at second base. We saw him in stints last year actually be usable in deeper leagues. Would you see yourself, if you maybe are a Moose owner, going and grabbing him?
I mean, maybe if it's a really deep league. I mean,
team, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Van Meter was definitely interesting with the home runs and speed. I definitely played him a few times. The plate discipline is pretty good, as is the hard hit rate. The batted ball quality, I think, on a StatCast perspective, hasn't been great. But I mean, he's generally solid, so I could certainly see him. Being a contributor in deeper leagues. If he plays on a regular basis, I think he's definitely going to be a platoon guy, so he's not going to be in there against lefties. And so you just got to play kind of the matchups in that respect, I think.
This next one's just kind of a let everybody know situation. We got Mark Melanson's been pitching, but kind of been dealing with a little back issue a little bit. And Will Smith is cleared to start full baseball activity, so he'll be back soon with the Braves. So just a heads up for people to keep an eye on that. Like that situation is going to start unfolding as we expected. Randall Grichuk, he got removed from the game with joint inflammation. That's not great for a guy that we both like. We're still waiting on information there. They, Teoscar had a decent game. There's other options in that Jays outfield. I guess it's a wait and see for now, but if you need to make a move, is he a droppable guy for you?
It depends. I think in 12s, you could probably drop him just because, the player pool there is just so much deeper. But I like Moustakas. He's definitely not at that level, but like him, I think you probably have an extra outfielder laying around, so you can kind of wait and see for another week. The Jays do have some good matchups coming up. if my memory serves me correctly, which is not all the time. But like this week, they do have the Nationals, although they have Sanchez and Voth to begin with before getting Scherzer. And then, again, we're not getting we may not be getting Strasburg, so we may get Fetty on the other end of that. And then they've got Philadelphia, which is a nice matchup. Then they've got Boston the following week, and the Braves, which doesn't necessarily concern me at all. So hold on to him, see what he does this week. Inflammation he could be back in the lineup tomorrow. I haven't seen anything that indicates that this could be a long-term thing. So
day-to-day. Latest reports day-to-day.
Day-to-day, yeah. So monitor.
All right, this one stings because Ken Giles was a favorite of many when you're drafting relievers. If you weren't going for one of the top guys, Ken Giles was a fan favorite of many. And he is diagnosed with right elbow soreness, going for an MRI on Monday. We've known he has a injury history in the past of arm issues, but it lingered again here. I was a Giles fan. A lot of people when he's on, he's one of the better closers in baseball, but he's already dinged up here early in the season. Anthony Bass seems to be the guy. We'll talk about Anthony Bass bids in Fab. My goodness, people like Anthony Bass. But with Ken Giles, again, obviously you're not dropping him right away, but right elbow soreness, this is almost as bad as the Verlander situation.
Yeah, it's definitely not good. I mean, I didn't watch the game, but just from seeing people's tweets, it sounded like he just didn't look good at all when he was out there. Velo down considerably. It all does not bode well, especially for a guy in Giles who's a two-pitch guy. I mean, he's a fastball slider guy, and he throws each pitch like 50% of the time, I feel like, if my memory serves me correctly, but there's a lot going on in this memory right now in terms of information. So double check that, but it's just not good. So I think it's another situation where see what the MRI says, but chances are I think you're going to have to probably move on from Mr. Giles, which is really disappointing. I mean, we knew that closers was going to be really challenging coming in, and it's proving to be, I think, really challenging already. And you mentioned the Melanson stuff. I got Melanson in a couple places, and that's rough.
Yeah, there's been a lot of closers. Like Jimenez hasn't looked great. Davis hasn't looked great. They're getting the saves. The Giants situation has just been an all disaster. Royal situation. We actually have a listener question on some of these save situations, so we'll talk about those later. But these coaches are definitely managing already in a weird way overall. So it's going to be a 60-game season we thought would be crazy. It already is. And to make it even better, Masahiro Tanaka, who was hit in the head by a line drive by Stanton a few weeks ago, has been thrown out of the bullpen. He's expected to start this weekend in Baltimore, but only throw about 3 innings. So I wouldn't start him just yet, but just a heads up. If you held on to Tanaka, he'll be back shortly. But when I want to ask you about Toby, this one's not good. Corey Kluber, I love Corey Kluber. Injured last year, obviously. He was going much later than he used to go in drafts. I still had some question marks there. Some guys I really, really respect were all about Corey Kluber. It sucks because he barely got through 1 inning today. Right shoulder tightness. They said it got tighter and tighter each pitch he threw, which really scares me. So he's going to get reevaluated. I'm almost just saying drop him. Obviously, he could bounce back after a couple weeks, but this sounds bad to me. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it doesn't sound great. Yeah, I mean, I think with Kluber, like the draft capital is such, I think you wait. It's a similar situation to Verlander in the sense that like they both sound like awful injuries. We know what Verlander's prognosis already is. He got an MRI yesterday. Theoretically, they'll do an MRI tomorrow if they haven't already on Kluber, and we'll find out the results either tomorrow or later. So next week, I mean, if he's out 3 weeks, 4 weeks, which sounds pretty, what's that? Pretty optimistic. What's that?
I said pretty likely.
Yeah. Or I mean, I think it sounds optimistic, based on just the description. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But again, it's tough out there. It's tough for sure. Yeah.
Let's go to Eloy Jimenez, who's been torching the baseball, as you know from your fantasy teams. He left the game after running into the wall on a play, and he's diagnosed with lightheadedness. So day-to-day, they say his status for Monday night series opener in Cleveland, they should know more before that game begins. So at least before lock, you should know if he's got a concussion, he's going to be out for like a week, or if he's a day-to-day and he should be playing. But most reports think he's going to be fine. We'll see. But Eloy is a big one. How nervous are you if they say he's day-to-day, do you still start him?
I don't start him the first half of the week in like an NFBC league, just because they only have 3 games. It's against Cleveland, and it includes 1 against Bieber. And so, if I know that he's only going to play 2 games that week, he's coming back from lightheadedness. Hopefully, if it's not a concussion, let's hope it's not, because there's no such thing as a minor concussion. That's just 2 games, and 1 is against Bieber. If he was fully healthy and just having those 2 games, I'd probably still have him in there, just because, he looks good.
Yep.
He looks so good. Like, just all of his at-bats, except for the ones against Randy Daubnak. He looked really good all weekend long. I think it's just a matter of time. If the White Sox are about winning games, they can't keep him where they're batting him. He's hitting 6 in some instances. I don't know how you don't have him in there instead of E5. Hitting cleanup instead of Grandal. I just feel like that's something that needs to happen. But just for this week, I wouldn't have him in that first 4 games unless he's in the lineup on Monday. If that's the case, then I put him in there. But otherwise, I think you just hope that, it's not a concussion, it's not long, that he's okay, and that he's back in there. I think this weekend, they have a nice matchup. I feel like they have the Royals at the end of this week. So you're just hoping that he's in there for that matchup, because that could be pretty sweet.
In the same game with the White Sox, Ronaldo Lopez left to start early with right shoulder tightness. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I'm dropping him if you own him. I didn't own him anywhere this year. I'm always a Lopez fan, but I would drop him because this does not sound good. And the rumors are his replacement is Gio Gonzalez, and I will not be adding him. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, it's just sad. Yeah. Really high hopes for Raylo towards the end of last season. Or no, it's the start of last season. He put a couple games together. I'll always remember that, I think it was 13K game. Might have even been 15Ks against the Tigers that he had, where it's just beasting. But yeah, I think you move on from him. It's just the thing you got to start asking yourself is, and I think this is a really challenging question, is, okay, who's he going up against in the next week? Obviously he's injured, but generally, with guys who struggled a lot, you look at him and you're like, well, I'm not going to pitch him next week because I don't feel comfortable about that. So look to the next week's schedule. If you're not planning to start a guy for a couple weeks because the matchup isn't good enough, then it may be time to kind of move on and find a replacement for them.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Just a heads up for people that might have missed it, Jose Urania, Garrett Cooper, Harold Ramirez, and Jose Alfaro of the Marlins have been diagnosed with COVID. They're staying in Philadelphia. The team is not flying out to Miami until tomorrow morning, so they're going to arrive for their game tomorrow a couple hours before game time. So that's something to keep in mind if you're setting stuff there. Tyler Flowers and Travis d'Arnaud were diagnosed with COVID for the Braves. So Williams, Contreras, and Alex Jackson are catching. Are you interested in adding either one of those catchers?
I don't think so. Contreras is a guy I've liked from a dynasty perspective for a while. He was actually the first guy, the first minor leaguer I drafted in my dynasty league that I started 2 years ago, because I went heavy on veterans to try to win now. And he was it, and I ended up trading him for somebody good, I think. I'm not really that into either of them at this moment in time. But monitor playing time, because any catcher, especially if you're in a 15-team double catcher league, any catcher that's getting 2 out of 3, maybe even 1 out of 2, if the hit tool is good enough, go with them. But at this point in time, I think it's a little premature to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to stay off of those 2 as well. A couple more here. Anthony Rendon still has not started a game yet. He worked out on Saturday. It's mixed feelings in Anaheim. It's some people are saying he might have to go on the IL. They're hoping he doesn't have to. It might be a down week again coming up. If you are a Rendon owner, do you roll the dice that he plays the back half of the week?
No. Well, definitely if he's not in the lineup on Monday, definitely don't put him in for Monday through Thursday. If you're in an NFBC, if it's a weekly league, I don't put him in there either. It's an oblique. We've been to the oblique party before with plenty of players, and generally they're not great.
Yep. Not good at all. A couple more here. Giovanni Gallegos is supposed to return to the Indians in action on Tuesday because he's been stuck in Mexico. He's been pitching the whole time, so he's ready to go. That's where all the reports were. He showed up. He's ready to go. So he's supposed to start up with the Cardinals on Tuesday, which makes things very interesting, Toby, because, Kim was called the closer. He got in. It was not pretty. He got the job done, but it was not pretty. You have Helsley, who's been pitching pretty good in the 7th and 8th inning so far. And then Gallegos was the guy everyone wanted. I don't know about you, but what's your thoughts on this Gallegos situation?
Well, I think it's still Kim. I think Kim still got it. Obviously, he got the save. He didn't look great. I didn't see the first 2 hits, but I think he gave up 3 singles, I want to say. And I know the double play that he gave up, I think he gave up a double play, was pretty hard hit, but giving up hard hit ground balls, it's not the worst thing in the world. So, the BABIP, again, I didn't see it, but I think when the Cardinals named him the closer, I think especially, new guy on the team, had a decent contract. I think they want to give him a shot, and he didn't blow it. So I think until he struggles a couple times in a row, I still believe that he's going to have the job. Remember, Gallegos struggled towards the end of last year, I believe. And he's only done it 1 year. And that's one thing about these relievers that have done it for 1 year that I'm a little nervous about, is that the velo for a lot of them was really critical. And so if they don't necessarily have the same velo, so monitor Gallegos' velo, compare that to what it was last year. Helsley's obviously been pitching well too, but there's also financial reasons why they wouldn't want to put him in the closer's gig. Obviously, that wasn't necessarily going to stop them, it sounded like, but they didn't put him there. And he's a young guy, probably a part of their bullpen long-term. So why put him in a situation where he gets saves and increase the cost of him, down the road? So, I think Kim's going to have the job. I actually think he is going to succeed in there. From everything I've read outside of it going up against the Pirates in that start, he was really good. And so let's give him some time. And maybe I'm just optimistic because I have him on a couple teams. But, I think, he's lefty, thrown from the left side. The velo was I think 93 to 95, I want to say, when he was going up against the Pirates. Command looks pretty good. So we'll see.
Here's my question for you. Giovanni Gallegos was dropped this week in my TGFBI league, and it really makes me want to bid on him next week. If he's out there, do you throw out bids for him? And if so, roughly, how much would you put out there?
Well, it depends, right? You're going to have a week to check it out. I'd monitor his velo. If his velo is similar to last year, if he looks good on the mound, then I think that's the type of guy that I'm interested in throwing speculative bids at it. The way that I think about it, the way that I'm thinking about Fab a lot of times this year is multiply by 3. So in a traditional league, what type of a bid would I throw on this guy? And then I'm going to multiply it by 3 because we're at about a third of the season. Gotcha. So, for me, that's probably a bid in the 5 to 15 range, in a regular league, just kind of he's not closing right now. So multiply that by 3. So something like 15 to 45 bucks. It all depends on what your situation is, but you make those and you don't think they're going to be anything, but you're hoping that something happens between the time you get them, and the time you might have to drop them that bodes well for their chances of getting the job.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Last piece of news here. There's plenty more out there. If you guys are interested, go search it up because lots of stuff took place over the weekend, but I just want to hit on it. Clayton Kershaw was scratched with back issues. Apparently he was lifting weights on Wednesday and tweaked it, but he threw on Friday. MRI came back clean. He's feeling great. Supposed to make his next start. So knock on wood, we're all good with Clayton Kershaw. Let's talk.
It's not great.
No, let's talk Fab from this last week. I know you made a few moves around. What were some of the main, before we just go over the big ads and kind of talk about them, who were some of the main guys that you acquired this week?
Yeah, I mean, for should I do TGFBI?
Sure, that's what I'm going to do because I don't have a lot of NFPC, but you do whatever you want. Okay.
Well, generally speaking, my strategy heading into this week, part of this is because my teams are doing well, but I think part of it is also we've had 3 games, we've had 3 games. Trust. I think Matt Modica said, tweeted it out, and I like the way he framed it. I think he said maybe it was Doug Dennis and Matt and him were just engaging, but it was just trust your, you spent all that time planning your draft and don't just give up on those guys after 3 days, right? There's some instances where you drafted the guy knowing I'm going to know at the end of the first week whether this guy is a drop or not, right? So Kyle Crick, for example, I had a ton of Kyle Crick. Didn't have him in a lot of lineups because he just didn't look good. I don't think he's getting anywhere near that closer's job. and so he's gone, right? And I have no problem moving on from him in that particular instance. So my general strategy was hold on to the guys who you thought were going to be good, unless there's a real reason to believe that they're not. And I don't, unless I see a guy who's going to make a meaningful difference, I'm not going to put a big bid on there. So I kept my bids pretty reasonably, except for in instances where I really needed a guy, and so in those, because I think everybody's going to blow the fab early, and the second half matters just as much as the first half. And everybody says you got to get off to a fast start because it's a short season. Well, because it's a short season, you can also make up a crap ton of ground with the right players in your lineup towards the back end of the season. So just remember that it is a short season, so you have less time, but it also means that the margins are finer and you can make up a lot of ground in that time. So my strategy, partially because my team is doing well and I like a lot of the pieces that I already have, but also just because like we just spent all this time doing draft prep and now you got your guys, I'm actually waiting as long as I can to spend that on guys who are going to make a meaningful difference on my team. I didn't see a ton of those here. I saw a lot of guys who could, but had big question marks around them. So to that end, in my TGFBI, I did get Greg Holland. I bid 71, backup was 63. I already have three-ish closers. I have 2 closers and Birdie, like in that particular instance. And, in situations like that, I'm not desperate for a closer, but I think Greg Holland could run with it. I mean, yes, Matheny has said it's going to be a closer by committee. They all start that way, right? Until somebody wins it. And Matheny even said afterwards, like I read the quote and that actually upped my bids a little bit, where he was like, Holland's done it before. He's been there before. When he gets in there, he doesn't shake at all. Like he's like, he knows what to do. And that's the way that I think Matheny thinks a little bit. And so, his velo was up 22% swinging strike rate last year, even with diminished velo on that slider. So I think he could be really good in the role. He struck out 3 guys. He did great in his opportunity. So why not give the ball to him again? Where, the other guys looked okay from an outcomes perspective, but they weren't blowing socks off of people. I think Ian Kennedy had like 1 swinging strike in 20 pitches. So did Rosenthal. His velo was high, but not necessarily like the 99 that we think about. So Greg Holland was a guy that I went with. I also got Eric Lauer. He's a big target for me this week, kind of under the radar, but he piggybacked on Freddie Peralta today. He had, I think, 2 1/3 innings, 6 Ks. He had a CSW of 41%, a swinging strike rate of 22%. He struck out Schwarber. He struck out, I don't think it was Baez, like Schwarber, Bryant, somebody else. When Knievel couldn't do the job, he kind of came in and was locked down. I think there's a good shot Peralta's not a 5-inning guy with the Brewers. And so maybe Lauer's in there to piggyback and get the victory. If not, I think they're now lined up where Lauer could take that rotation spot away from Peralta if they deem that Peralta's a little bit more valuable in the bullpen. So I went with Lauer in a lot of my leagues, 24, no backup bid. I went Jacoby Jones in a lot of my leagues, who's gotten off to a really good start. He's batting 9th, but he could move up in that lineup if he continues to hit. 24, backup of 1. The big bids were Kim went for $200. Brady Singer went for 172. Bass went for 160. Brian Abreu went for 150, even though I think Presley definitely has that gig. So yeah, those were kind of the big ones in my TGFBI. What about you?
Yeah, I just got a couple. Like I went and got Jared Klinick this week because no one got him last week. I wanted to stash him because I didn't really have any major targets like you were saying. So I went and got Klinick, no backup bid there. So I could have got him for $1, which is disappointing. And then just kind of speculating real cheap for $12 because I could have won $1 here too. But I try to escalate the price a little bit because we're on a shortened season. And it's a crazy bid. I could see myself dropping him at some point in time. But just in case, with Jimenez being goofy in Detroit, I went and grabbed Buck Farmer now just to have him. He actually pitched well in his 2 outings. So I just kind of stashed him cheap because if somehow he becomes the closer, we know how much he's going to go for. So that $12 will feel very nice at that point in time. And it's just one of those. I really had no one else I wanted. The other guy I wanted was Brady Singer. You mentioned he went for like 170 or something in yours. He went for 31 in mine. I tied the bid and I lost it because the guy that's behind me in the standings also put 31. So that was a bit of a stinger there. But the big ones here, Alex Cobb, Smata, if you're still listening, Alex Cobb went for $217 with no backup bid. So that was a bit surprising. Anthony Bass went high. Greg Holland went high. And like guys like Eno Saris went Taylor Williams with no backup bid. Michael Fulmer with no backup bid. So those are the kind of big ones that kind of surprise. Like Fulmer I get, but at that price point, I was kind of surprised as well. Let's go in just the overall NFBC. There's like 188 total events here leagues that took place here in the Fabbage. And Anthony Bass was one of the most added guys, went for as high as 600, as low as 1. We had Greg Holland went in 175 leagues as high as 990, as low as 3. Brady Singer was popular. Kiki Hernandez, Martin Maldonado, they were all added in over 100 leagues. Do you have any thoughts on Anthony Bass? We kind of talked about him. Greg Holland, you mentioned Singer, Kiki Hernandez, Martin Maldonado.
Yeah, for me, Bass was interesting. I mean, I put like some smaller bids in on him. I think it seems like just from like a usage perspective, he threw the 8th today, so it seems like he would be next in line. So that's the guy that I would throw down on. He doesn't necessarily have the ideal closer repertoire. Doesn't have strike out a guy per inning even. He's got some decent pitches, but not really like a knockout pitch. Fastball isn't great. So, I mean, he's done the job, in different places. So I think he's fine, but he's not necessarily somebody that I was super excited about. Who are the other guys?
There were Brady Hernandez, Team Motto.
Oh, you're frozen up, I think. Now you're back.
It's okay. Brady Singer, Kiki Hernandez, Martin Maldonado.
So Brady Singer, yeah, I liked him. I put in some bids. He's got, I think he's got Detroit, I want to say, if I'm not incorrect. Yeah, I think he's got Detroit on Thursday, I believe. So that's a really nice matchup. And then I want to say he's also got a 2-start week.
Yep.
The following week, one against St. Louis and one against Pittsburgh. So not bad at all. So I think that was a really nice add. Kike Hernandez, he's if he's playing every day, like that's going to be a really spot to be in. He's got the dual position eligibility. He's shown flashes in the past, really good plate discipline, hard hit rate, hitting the ball in the air more. So he's got all the pieces I think you look for kind of a breakout candidate. So hopefully he continues to play every day. Martin Maldonado, I think people are just rotating in probably, the matchup I want to say for Houston, what is it? Seattle, LA, Angels. I mean, it's probably catcher 2 stuff. So you're just trying to kind of grind it out, get a guy who's playing a decent amount on a decent team.
A couple other big ads. Oliver Drake, he got that save with the Rays. Would you have any interest in Oliver Drake?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, Oliver Drake, he's part of that bullpen that is just, what's that?
He's your boy. You were tweeting about him last year.
Yeah, I tweeted him. Well, I can't take credit for that. I think it was Nick Mariano who, I put out a tweet that was like, yo, this Rays bullpen. And it was like Posh and Kittredge and Pagan when he was on the team. Like, these guys are great. And Nick tweeted underneath, he's like, yeah, don't sleep on Oliver Drake either. And I took a look at that and I was like, damn, Drake is really good. The one thing that stood out about that for me was they didn't put him in for lefty matchups.
Interesting.
First guy he got was Bo Bichette, I think. He got 2 righties and 1 lefty.
That's big.
And so, yeah, I mean, maybe I should have threw down like a little bit more, but maybe I should have. He was expensive, man. Like in some of my leagues, I want to say he was God, let me take a look here. I think he went for over 150 in at least a couple of my leagues. Let's see, where's this good old Oliver Drake?
He went for 105 in my TGFBI, as high as 385 in certain leagues.
Yeah. Yeah, he went for 144 in one of my mains. He went for 83 in one of my mains. And then he also went for 113. Yeah, so he was, he wasn't that expensive, but he was pretty expensive. And everything the Rays have said, they're going to go with a committee. And so, Yeah, I mean, he's a really good pitcher. I mean, I don't mind having guys like that because they're really good pitchers. At least they have been. And so, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening there.
Trevor Gott was added in 78 leagues, as high as 258, as low as 1. Picked up the save for the Giants the other night, where Tyler Rogers and Tony Watson split up duty in the 8th inning. So that was interesting to see. Gott has good stuff, but was not really on the saves radar for the most part. A couple others that kind of Carlos Rodon is getting a rejuvenation. He's getting added in a lot of places. Pablo Lopez got some big weeks coming up here. And then a bunch of kind of the usual suspects that, coming off good weeks. Kim got added everywhere that he wasn't added already. Kyle Wright. You mentioned Jacoby Jones. Anybody else that stands out to you as ads for the week?
Jacoby Jones. I mean, I talked about him a little bit. I'm staying away from the Giants bullpen. Kepler has never shown any interest in using just like a single closer at all. And so I don't know why he'd start doing that with Trevor Gott. I was checking the Giants game just now just to see where they were like in the game and whether we'd have any more idea about what they were doing there. Miguel Rojas was a guy that I targeted super heavily in a lot of leagues with just little tiny bids. But man, he's come out smoking. He makes a ton of contact with all those injuries that the Marlins now have. Birdie batted second today, but I wouldn't be surprised if Rojas is batting second for the foreseeable future for the 4 games they have against the Orioles. So I have a bunch of him across the board. He was a guy that I was really interested in. But outside of that, I think it's just a lot of Jonathan Hernandez is another guy I put a bunch of bids in on. Those were kind of the guys that stood out to me. And again, a lot of it was just looking at it and saying like, I like the guys that are going to go for high fab bids, but I don't think that's for me right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. If anybody's curious, go check out the whole list over there. See a lot of interesting takes and scenarios. All right, let's take some listener questions and wrap this bad boy up. We will start at the top. Good old Yancey Eaton. Assuming Kyle Lewis is available in a 15-team league, what percentage of your fab are you willing to throw down on him? If he's available in your league, I would run and go get him. I don't want to break the bank. I know Toby won't break the bank. I'd say at least 30 to 40%. I think he's legit.
Break the bank, man. I never break the bank.
What percentage would you? I'd probably go at least 40% on Kyle Lewis. I think he's legit.
Yeah, I mean, I think he went like around 250 on average in a lot of the leagues that I was in, if not higher. Again, what I would do, I wouldn't do that. But Lewis, the batted ball quality, I think leaves little doubt. But this is a guy who last year struck out in close to 40% of his plate appearances. Mm-hmm. And I haven't looked at like what he's doing so far from like a contact perspective. But, he did this when he came up last year. And then, again, he kind of struggled for a little while there towards the end. So, yeah, last year he had 6 home runs and 75 plate appearances, that 268 batting average, but struck out in 38.7% of his plate appearances, a 351 BABIP. So again, he could be very good. And, he's already, it looks like in the comments they're saying he's already struck out 6 times this year. So yeah, he's striking out 50% of the time. He's got a 0 BABIP because every time he's put the ball in play, he's hit a home run. So that's the thing is with these small sample sizes, you just got to just look at so he's, his contact rate right now is his in-zone contact rate right now is 30%, which means that every 10 swings, he makes contact 3 times. So he's making contact right now. He could continue to do it, but I don't want to put a big investment in a guy that is striking out that much. So that's kind of my take on it. Again, a great guy to add, but I wouldn't be relying on him necessarily for anything beyond power.
All right. Another guy on the Mariners, Yancey wants to know about J.P. Crawford. He's continuing to bat second in front of guys like Lewis and White, who are swinging good bats so far. We know in the past, Crawford, in the minors, okay average guy, a little bit of pop, a little bit of speed. Nothing super flashy. Wants a big-time prospect. If he continues to second, I think he's an ad in a 15-team league.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little bit interesting to me because he does have the plate skills. He walks a bunch. low K rate, even last year and close to 400 plate appearances, 21%. So I think he's a matchup play for me. The concern, right, is, again, 226 batting average. The contact, he does not make the quality of contact you need. 7 home runs and 400 plate appearances and 5 stolen bases. And so I guess the question is, like, yes, he may get you volume of plate appearances, but do you want volume of plate appearances at a 226 batting average? And the other question is, again, like, it depends on what your team situation is, but, you got middle infield is so deep, that is he really the guy that you need? And I would say look for a matchup where he's got good hitting matchups and he's got good stolen base matchups as well. So it could be back end of that Astros rotation. It could be, other guys, none are coming to mind right now, back end of the Mets rotation, things like that, where you can expect maybe a little bit of speed and a little bit of hit for that period of time. But I don't think he's a long-term ad.
All right. Yancey's last question, serious question. He says, when Flip finishes first and second overall in the main event off the back of JT Realmuto, what's one fun thing you're going to buy? You can't say something lame like pay bills.
He knows me so well.
Yes.
No, I mean, again, it's very premature. I do think, let's see, where am I at right now? I am still first in the overall, which feels good to be able to say. I'm not going to lie, even though we're just 3 days in. My other team is 5th now, so it's taken a little bit of a hit. But what I would buy, I'll probably buy a new TV. I'll buy a new, very nice TV. My TV is probably like 4 or 5 years old. I had my brother-in-law. He just moved into a new place. He was asking me what TV I had, and I told him, and he was like, "What? You got to upgrade, man." And so I'd probably get a new TV. I don't have a lot of things, to be honest with you. Like I just don't have a lot of things. So he knows me. I'm super boring. I'd probably I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably put it away in retirement or something like that. But
I bet you take the kid to Harry Potter Land at Universal Studios and all dress up as Harry Potter.
There you go. Post-COVID. We would go on a nice vacation. My wife certainly deserves it. She certainly deserves it for Fab and putting up with me, my fantasy baseball interest. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd probably do the TV, probably a couple shirts, maybe a new computer. Maybe get like a nice Mac computer or something like that. I don't know, but I don't really need that. So,
all right, Taylor _Bauer 11 asks us, in weekly lineup leagues, what are you doing with players like Austin Meadows, Nick Senzel, Hunter Dozier, COVID positive or suspected players this week, knowing they could miss the week or be back any day? So first off, what are you doing with players like that?
Yeah, I don't. If they're not in on Monday and it's a weekly league, I don't have them in my lineup.
Yep,
can't take a 0.
Yep. How low would replacement level need to be to roll them out there? Like if the backup he had on his bench, how bad do they have to be to stay screwed? I'll roll it.
I mean, definitely deeper than a 15. Like in 15s, you can get guys who play every day, right? Like I could get Jacoby Jones, who's playing every day. He's batting 9th, which is not ideal, but he's got a little speed, a little bit of power, and a good matchup. So I'd say deeper than 15, maybe. If you're in like an AL only or NL only, I don't play them. But if you're in something like that and there's just nothing else available, then maybe it's worth it. But you just try to run the probabilities in your mind. What's the percentage chance that they're back? What's the percentage chance that they actually do well? Just coming back and not having seen live pitching probably for a while.
Yeah, if I don't see any positive news on Monday, I'm just going to say screw it and play someone else. I'm not even going to mess with that. David Mendelson asks us, which top 20 starting pitcher that has gone so far are we most concerned about? Which one that had a bad performance are you trying to buy low? So which one, I'd say besides guys that got hurt, obviously, are you most, like we talked Charlie Morton. That's concerning. Who was the most concerning like top 20 guy for you?
Charlie Morton. Yeah. Charlie Morton is the one I'm worried about here. Let me just pull this up just to make sure I'm operating from the right starting pitchers here. Okay, so guys that concern me are outside of the injured ones. Charlie Morton. Lucas Giolito concerns me. I didn't end up.
Is he a buy low option for you? Would Giolito be a buy
Well,
low?
so here's the deal with Giolito. I love Giolito. I don't have any shares, and I think the reason I couldn't pull the trigger, number one, was because I generally had 2 starting pitchers by the time he was going around. But the schedule for him is brutal. It doesn't let up. Like in the middle of the season, he starts to get the Tigers and the Royals in those games, but he's got the Twins a couple times. I think he's got the Brewers. I think he's at Milwaukee. Like, I just thought he was going to get off to a slow start, and so I don't have him on any of my big teams. The only other 2 guys that concern me, I am concerned about Yu Darvish. I don't have any shares of Yu Darvish. He's just so inconsistent. And you saw it against the Brewers. He didn't walk anybody. My God, I was not comfortable watching that start. I was just waiting for them to just start bombing it off of him. And I don't know what it is. He's throwing hard with velocity, but I just wasn't that into the way that he looked. And then the other guy would be Clevenger. I think Clevenger, based on competition and what he was able to do, he was still solid. But again, I don't have any shares of Clevenger either. And maybe it's just, again, confirmation bias because I don't have these guys. But Clevenger definitely worries me. Guys that I would buy low on, I mean, Scherzer. Yes. I don't know if you can buy low on Scherzer after 12 Ks, but people seem to be disappointed in his performance, which is understandable given the cost that he was. I don't know if there's any buy lows in that group, really.
It's tough to buy low on a top 20 pitcher after one start.
It is hard to buy low on a guy like that. I'm just trying to think of let me look at my spreadsheet. Oh, one guy who concerned me, one guy who I'd be concerned about is Brandon Woodruff.
Yeah,
again,
really?
Up against the Cubs. He was up against the Cubs. One of the reasons why I was down on him heading into the year is because the CSW and the swinging strike rate did not support the number of Ks he had. The one day that I really looked in depth at CSW, Woodruff had an 8.2% swinging strike rate, 7 out of 85 pitches, and his CSW was 24.7%. Now, he didn't pitch poorly, but that tells me he wasn't fooling anybody. Again, Cubs, very good lineup, but you would expect more from a guy who's theoretically your SP2, I think, in a lot of instances. So that would be one guy that I'm concerned about. And then a guy that I would buy low on who's maybe a little bit deeper down, who didn't pitch that well. Maybe, just going based on the stats, I would say maybe I'd go with Aaron Nola, 16.3% swinging strike rate, 35% CSW. Again, Marlins aren't great, but really what he did is I think he had one bad inning where, he gave up a couple hits and then a home run, and that was about all he did. I think that would be a guy that I might think about buying low on, depending on what he does in this next start. Another guy who wasn't super impressive, Boyd obviously wasn't impressive. Berrios was not impressive at all. Good White Sox team, but 9.3% swinging strike rate, 24% CSW. Mad Bum did not look good at all. 9% swinging strike rate, 26% CSW. Soroka had a really nice swinging strike rate at 13%, but was only 26.1% for a CSW. So to me, that says, again, I don't know if the Ks are coming anywhere. So so that would be my kind of rundown initially on pitchers. I haven't had done the deep dive on the Saturday guys or today's just because of Fab, man.
Berrios and Bumgarner were 2 of the velocity down guys, so something to keep in mind there. Fantasy Capper asked, what about Greinke, who had a rough day today? He struggled a lot in Seattle, but I didn't look at his big time numbers, but I didn't see anything that stood out too crazy when I looked at the glimpse of it. So I wouldn't panic yet on Greinke.
Yeah, I wouldn't panic on Greinke either. I mean, the thing about Greinke is you didn't get him because you thought he was going to be dominant necessarily in the same way that you would necessarily anticipate. But we kind of knew heading in that this wasn't going to be a great start for him. His velo was down. 87.7 is not terrific. That's like Kyle Hendricks style. But we knew that he wasn't up to par yet, right? We knew, I think, from the mining the news and just doing our own research that he wasn't going to go the full game. He only threw 58 pitches today. So that's one thing. It doesn't look too bad just looking at it, again, he had 7 out of 58 pitches. This is great entertainment right here, watching me run my calculator. So he had a 12.1% swinging strike rate, and then his CSW was 32.8%. So that's really good, So even though with the decreased velocity against a not very good opponent, the skills, and that's not the only skill that matters, but those were generally there. I think he walked a couple guys, which is not what he usually does. And so I just don't think he's there yet. He had a really awful first start last year too. And then he was brilliant for the rest of the year pretty much. So I still have faith in Greinke. So maybe that's a guy where people weren't impressed and they may want to move on early, that I might look at Greinke.
All right. Torres Talks Baseball wants to know, why am I addicted to Garrett Hampson and where can I get help for this? You're addicted because he had a great September, but you forgot the fact the Rockies are going to screw with him. So that's where you can get help. There's a lot of people on Twitter that can help you because they're all on the same boat.
For sure. I mean, yeah, it's a common affliction, right? The talent, our belief in them and how well they're going to do does not coincide with the facts that we've seen so far. And, that's why we love the game. So embrace it, but don't get too carried away so that it impacts how good your fantasy baseball team is.
Okay, a couple bullpen questions here from Wake Up. Pittsburgh, what are we doing with the closers there? You got Birdie, you have Crick, Kello will be back one day. What are you doing with Pittsburgh?
Well, I think, Crick, it looks bad. I would stay the heck away from Crick. Velo's down, just doesn't look like a good pitcher. Ricardo Rodriguez is a possibility. He pitched, though, I think in the 6th the other day. Again, they've said it's a committee, but, we got to look at like what the usage is so far. Birdie is Birdie's really freaking good. Like, I think he had an 18% swinging strike rate last year. I think he is potentially a dominant reliever. And even if he doesn't get saves, I don't think it's going to hurt you to have him in the lineup. So he's definitely the guy that I'm targeting. I mean, I love Birdie. I loved him last week. I've got him on a ton of different teams. And then I think Michael Feliz is another guy that you got to be looking at, who hasn't been mentioned, but has always had the skills, and I think is starting to gain the trust and the confidence of the manager. And I think that's one thing that's really important, right? You got these new managers, they're watching their guys real closely, and if they're blowing up in the bullpen, that sticks with them. Those first impressions, I think, stick with them. So I like Birdie. I'd be hardcore into him. Feliz is kind of a sleeper. Maybe that doesn't get talked about. Maybe Rodriguez, but I think Birdie's, borderline playable just regularly, because I think he's going to strike out, 1.5 guys per inning on average about.
St. Louis, we already mentioned Kim's the guy there that we kind of like. Kansas City, we hit on, Rosenthal, Kennedy, Holland. I think you're thinking Holland's the guy?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, we just don't know, but everything that I see so far points towards Holland. They saved him for when they had a lead. They used the other guys earlier where they would never have been in save situations. And he did really well with the job. You've got a quote saying the manager trusts him and believes that he's done this before and that he has nerves of steel. So, and I think he can be good. I think with mile per hour velo bump, if that continues to get higher as he warms up, that's better. We've already seen that he can be successful with that slider, even with low velocity. Why not? Why can't he be successful?
Last question from Wake Up. How much fab would you spend on Spencer Howard? He's supposed to jump into the rotation here pretty soon, they're guessing, because, he threw today. They're trying to keep him on track to go when Vinny V finally gets taken out, it sounds like. So Spencer Howard should be coming up in the next week or two. I'm still being tentative on that. I think he's a good pitcher, but I kind of want to hear more on it beforehand. But once we hear that, he can go for a lot. What would you spend on Howard?
Vinny V went today, right?
Yeah, it was not pretty. The first game was pretty. Not so much.
I mean, it could be a good investment. I mean, if he took Velasquez's next start, that would be at Toronto, and then he'd have Miami, and then he'd have potentially Baltimore or Atlanta. So, I mean, I don't like putting big bids in. It's probably going to be my downfall this year. But, if there's anybody who's going to come in and make a difference besides Nate Pearson, Howard seems to be the guy. He's in a good context. So why not throw a couple bills at it? 200, 250? I don't know. I'm not going to do that, but.
All right.
Listen to Bubba, is what I'm saying. Listen to Bubba. Bubba, how much would you throw in there?
On Spencer Howard, I would throw maybe like 120. I'm not going to go too crazy on him because I like Spencer Howard, but if I wanted Spencer Howard, I would have drafted Spencer Howard. I'm not going to play a bidding war for Spencer Howard. So we knew he was going to come up in a couple weeks. We knew that going into it. I'm not going to go on a bidding war for him. Dave Petrozziello asks, he has Verlander on his team. He also drafted Whitley late. Do we think Whitley gets the job? You'd like to think so, but I think they have so many moving parts in Houston. You got Framber Valdez or Urquidy's supposed to come back. Urquidy gets the shot before Whitley does.
Yeah. Well, I think you just need to see how it lines up. So like Greinke pitched today. And so then, you have, God, let me bring up my grid here. So, because one of the things you got to take into consideration too is even if they're down a guy in the lineup, then just but if they have off days, they can just skip. They can skip times through the rotation. And it's not like they've treated their rookies in other situations, like Kyle Tucker, where they're anxious to get them into play. So you got Greinke today, James on Monday, Framber Valdez on Tuesday. Then you would have where Verlander usually goes, and they'll probably do some sort of bullpen game or something like that. Then they have an off day. Then you have McCullers, Greinke, James, Framber Valdez. And then you have another off day. So really, they're not going to need him until early August at the earliest. And so. I don't think I would speculate on him. We also just don't know how he's going to pitch. He's obviously got the skills, but he's also looked really bad at different times. And a lot of young pitchers struggle initially. So I'm not a big fan of targeting those kinds of guys. But once they announce what his role might be, and if he's that guy, obviously the price will go up. But, so maybe I'll throw like a little bit just to have him on my team when that announcement is made. But other than that, not super interested.
At MMS 79, we answered the Verlander question. We answered a Kyle Lewis question. So the other question he has, thoughts on Gregory Polanco potentially coming back this week. I'm not running to go play Gregory Polanco. He's been Gregory Polanco, unfortunately, for a few years. If you're in a super deep league and want to take a chance, sure. But I think there's other targets I'd rather go for. What about you, Toby?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're in a 15-team league, sure, go ahead. Play the matchups. They do have Milwaukee. I think that's 3 right-handed pitchers coming up early next week. Then they have the Cubs. Then they have Minnesota, Detroit, St. Louis. So they've got a nice little stretch of games there. So, yeah, if you need power, potentially speed in your bat. But, again, Polanco is not necessarily anybody that, that you really want to invest a lot in, given the long history of injuries and relative lack of performance.
Couple more here. Sam Crawford asks, how are we going to go prospect crazy next year with no MILB? I'm positive we'll be able to go prospect crazy because that's what we do. There will be enough beat writers and enough people speculating and videos out there. We'll be able to go just fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're really going to have to track those beat writers really closely because those are going to be like, in the bulleted section, the little news and notes there down at the bottom is where you're going to get the little updates about like Wander Franco looks great. Obviously, we know Wander Franco is going to be great, but like, some of the lesser known prospects, like so-and-so is impressing in alternate camp or whatever.
Yeah, definitely going to be there. At Zach Roto asks, if you could take 25 cents on the dollar, would you cash all your chips out in the main event right now?
If I could take $25,000 right now,
25 cents on the dollar. So yeah, $25,000 right now to
of course
watch.
I would. Of course I would.
There we go.
Come on, man. I mean, look, my teams are doing really well, but we're 3 games into the season. If you told me at the beginning of the season you're going to invest $1,200 in a league and you're going to make $25,000 off of it, heck yeah, I'd take that right now. Like I'm not greedy, man. The pot odds on me winning the overall, despite being 1-1 currently, is very, very slim. So I would definitely take that. But I want to play it out. I want to have fun. This is fun for me. So.
Marty at Beamer Cleaner asks, how long should we wait to pull the trigger on a guy that starts off slow with only 60-game season? We talked about it a lot. A lot of it's dependent on your roster, but you can't wait too long. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, just like any time, you got to don't look at the outcomes. Small sample. Don't look at the outcomes. Look at the skills. If a guy's contact rate is the same, if his hard hit rate is the same, if his barrel rate is the same, everything's the same, but he doesn't have home runs or he doesn't have the batting average he usually has, that generally means that pretty soon it's going to come. And so what you don't want to do is bail too early and miss out on that. But if it's clear that a guy is struggling and there's some reason he might be struggling, right? There's news that he might be injured, his contact rate has plummeted, he's hitting the ball on the ground a ton more than he used to, things like that, like then that would be a reason to move on from a guy because he's not playing well. And I think that's a different thing. And it also depends who they are, right? If it's your second round draft pick and he's struggling, you're not just going to drop him, right? Because theoretically he was good, he was good. That's why you drafted him. So
100% with you there. A lot of context into play on that one. Couple questions from the chat here. Pete Tartag asks,
this is great. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, Pete Tartag asks, do we think Hudson takes over the 9th inning role in DC, basically from Doolittle? I've been a fan from day one saying Hudson's going to get plenty of chances there. I think, a lefty matchup, righty matchup thing plays out pretty well. What are your thoughts on that DC situation?
Certainly looks good after today, right? I mean, it's recency bias, but Doolittle didn't look great. He blew the lead, I think, and he was in the 8th, right? If I'm not incorrect, either the 8th or the 7th. And his velocity was down a lot in spring training. I haven't checked it out yet, but I imagine if we took a look at it, it would probably be down. So yeah, I think Hudson's a great spec.
Real McCoy Break says Oliver is a must pickup in his opinion. So check that out. He's a big prospect guy, so he would know what he likes there. Leland Tagliari had a bunch of questions. I'll kind of sum them up for you here. For the Mariners, like Matt McGill's closing right now, it looks like. You got Yoshihiro Hirano there.
McGill threw the 5th today.
Oh, so that just gets even better there.
I dropped McGill. I dropped McGill in a couple of leagues. Because if they are going to go, we finished the question. Sorry.
I was going to say, do you think Austin Adams is the closer once he returns?
I don't think anybody's going to be the closer. If I was going to spec on a closer, I'd go with Hirano when he's back from COVID. So if he's on your wire, if somebody dropped him, then I would look at a speculative ad later on, just because he's got the contract, he's old. You got to think about the context that they're in. Like they want to move pieces, right? They would love for Hirano to look good in extra inning or like in the closer role and then ship him off to somebody else to be their 7th or 8th reliever for some sort of minor leaguers, right? Or some sort of chip that they have because, they're not necessarily, they're going for it this year, but they're not going for it this year. Although they did, they are 2-1, right? But like a situation like Seattle is a good one. It reminds me of the Giants in the sense that it's not a very good team. It's clear that it's going to be a committee unless there's one solid guy. So if there's no point, there's nobody good enough in there to be it. I think Austin Adams probably has the best skills of anybody in that bullpen. So would I want him probably over everybody else? Yes. But I think Hirano, if anybody is going to get that job and roll with it, it's going to be him.
Yeah, in the preseason, I was on the Hirano train just because of experience alone and get some work out of him. Davey Deals likes to deal, so I could see that being on there as well. Last question, Leland Tagliari asks, Jose Leclerc, he was sketchy early on here. Are you stashing Montero anywhere?
No, I'm stashing Jonathan Hernandez. Montero has not pitched yet. He's either injured or has COVID. Jonathan Hernandez is the clear 8th inning guy. He's been a star in spring training, in summer camp. He's looked really good. He's pitched pretty well here. I think he's got 2 innings now, 2 clean innings. Well, I don't know if it's called clean. I mean, no earned runs given up. But I think he's given up like 1 walk and 1 hit. I think, in those, and he struck out 2. Leclerc looked shaky. He always is kind of shaky. So Hernandez is a guy I targeted a bunch as kind of like a, if Leclerc blows a save or 2 this week, even not, I could see them going to him just because I think Woodard has said before the season started that they wanted to move Leclerc around a little bit, and maybe use him in the highest leverage situations. And so I could see an instance where Hernandez actually gets those 9th inning looks at this point in time. And the other guy, Martin, who was kind of rumored to get looks, I think he had COVID. I think Montero's just injured. So yeah, it would be Hernandez that I'd be going for. He's gone in pretty much all 15-team leagues though by this point.
One more question from the YouTube guys. Kenny Linson asks, do you guys like the new extra innings rule? I don't like it at all. I never liked it to begin with. I think it's just silly. Even Clevenger said it's dumb. I get why they're doing it, but I'm not a fan of it at all.
Yeah, I don't like it either. It's just it's not that big of a deal. It's artificial to me.
Yeah.
And so I would rather they tie. I don't know what the problem with ties is. NFL ties, soccer they tie, but for some reason in baseball we can't have a tie. Why? Why can't we have a tie in baseball?
ABO has ties.
Does it?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So there you go.
Play a max of 12 innings. If it
We
gets
got another
12
question.
innings, then call it a tie.
Cubby Knoll drops in with a question real quick. Roll the 2-start dice on Homer Bailey versus St. Louis and Cleveland. Would you roll the dice? Because he says he could suck, but he could still get dubs. What's your thoughts on that?
Bailey is a little bit off my radar.
Yeah.
And it's maybe not for a good reason, but he just hasn't looked good, I think, all spring. He got rocked his last time out. A 2-start is a big commitment. Cubby will know who I'm talking about here. I would rather start Alec Mills at Cincinnati and then at home against Pittsburgh than I would Homer Bailey against St. Louis and Cleveland. I think especially that Cleveland one is like just a little dicey. And again, being the beginning of the season, I'd be a little bit concerned about whether he will go 5 or not. And he just hasn't looked sharp yet. So not that I'm like that scared of the St. Louis lineup. I think they're a little overrated as a lineup. But yeah, anyways. And let me know, Cubby, if you're watching this live, let me know what you think about me starting Alec Mills. The one thing I'm concerned about is that he doesn't go 5 in those. But, I actually thought he was a really good pitcher last year, and it seems like he's a smart pitcher. Doesn't have the velocity, but he's got a couple nasty breaking / off-speed pitches. And so I feel a little better about that than a guy like Bailey, who is relying on just giving up home runs a lot throughout his career and has a lot of splitter. He's got that splitter that could be tough.
Yeah, no, I used Bailey a lot last year when he was pitching in Oakland. On the road, not so much. Cubby Knoll says, thanks. No Senzel or Moose versus Mills and above-average secondary offerings. I can see that.
That's true. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, they do have a little bit of a reduced lineup, if you will. All
right. That'll wrap us up this week. Episode 45 in the books. Opening weekend in the books. Lots of good stuff. Toby, any final thoughts?
I don't think so. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I mean, this has been a lot of fun. There's positive, there's negative for sure. But, baseball is a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun watching the games and doing the things that I normally do, checking the box scores, checking the scores, checking the live scoring, doing it all. Fab, I don't know if I'm quite at enjoying Fab yet, but it's nice to have that first Fab run out of the way, kind of grease the wheels, if you will, of trying to get that Fab machine going. So thanks everybody for listening. A lot of fun. Thank you, Bubba, as usual. And I hope everybody has a really good week.
Yep. We'll do it again next weekend. Hopefully a great weekend of baseball ahead of us. Everyone stay safe out there and dodges all the minefields that are in the day-to-day life we live. But check out Toby on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I'm at BDentric. This is Bubba in the BatFlip 45. Catch you guys next week.